In a completely different world, a world covered by massive ice sheets where the air was biting, resources were scarce. This was the Ice Age, an era of extreme cold, eerie silence where survival was a daily challenge. How did the humans of that time, with their small numbers and limited capabilities, withstand the harshness of nature in its most extreme form? What skills did they develop? And how did they adapt to an environment that threatened with death by starvation and cold at every moment? It was not easy, and there was no luxury or external support. The mere search for food or shelter was a struggle for survival. We will dive deep into that distant era. We will explore the survival strategies employed by humans, from innovative hunting methods in frozen wilderness to building shelters that protected them from the harsh elements, and how these harsh conditions shaped their minds and bodies. Thousands of years ago, during the periods of the Ice Ages, large parts of our planet were covered by massive ice sheets, stretching for hundreds of miles and reaching kilometers in thickness. These periods were not just a long, cold winter. They were a radical transformation of the climate and environment, posing unprecedented challenges for all living creatures, including humans. Temperatures were winters were long and harsh, and summers were short and weak. Barreling the surface layers of snow, the winds were fierce, carrying icy snow particles that lashed the face and penetrated any protection. The sky was often gray, reflecting the coldness of the earth. In this harsh environment, the forms of plant and animal life changed. The dense forests we know today were rare, replaced by cold tundra plains where mosses, lichens, and some small shrubs grew. This change in vegetation directly affected the types of animals available for hunting. The massive animals that adapted to these conditions were the primary source of food and clothing for humans. The woolly mammoth, woolly rhinoceros, reindeer, and massive bison roamed these frozen plains. Hunting these giant creatures required exceptional courage, collective organization, and deep knowledge of their behavior. Access to liquid water was not easy, as most water was frozen in rivers and lakes or trapped in ice sheets. Obtaining drinking water required melting snow or searching for springs that had not yet frozen. Every aspect of life required doubled effort just to stay alive. In this merciless frozen world, humans were just a small part of the natural fabric. They had to adapt or face extinction. This is the first chapter of the story of human resilience in the face of the deadly silence of the snow. Finding food was not the only challenge for humans. Securing suitable shelter was an absolute necessity for survival. Spending the night in the open meant almost certain death due to freezing. So, our ancestors developed clever strategies to utilize available resources to build shelters that protected them from the harsh weather. Caves were the most natural and least labor-intensive shelters. They provided immediate protection from wind and snow, and their walls retained some relative warmth. Therefore, finding suitable caves was a top priority for nomadic human groups. Inside these caves, humans lit fires to keep warm, cook food, and provide light in the utter darkness. Caves were not available everywhere. In the vast plains, devoid of rock formations, humans had to build their own shelters. Here, hunting skill emerged as the key to survival, not just for food, but for raw building materials. The woolly mammoth, for example, provided not only meat and fat, but also its massive bones, which were used as frameworks for dwellings. These bone dwellings were built by planting large mammoth bones into the ground to form a frame, which was then covered with thick animal skins. These skins provided excellent insulation against cold and wind, and sometimes they were weighed down with stones or their edges were buried in the ground to increase stability against snowstorms. These shelters were not just places to sleep, they were centers of social life. Inside them, families gathered, made tools, processed animal skins, and shared stories and knowledge. The warmth provided by the fire in these shelters was the center of existence, a symbol of survival in the face of the killing. The construction of these complex shelters reflects the intelligence of ancient humans and their ability to adapt to the environment. It is proof of human ingenuity in turning the most dangerous resources into a means of protection, to secure a safe haven in a world where cold was the greatest threat. In the Ice Age, fire was more than just a means of warmth. It was a fundamental pillar of human existence and survival in a world enveloped in perpetual frost. The ability to ignite and maintain a fire was the difference between life and death, between resilience and silent extinction. Humans learned gathered to war. The warmth was not only physical, but also provided a sense of security and psychological comfort. Hostile and it was the bright darkness of the icy nights. The role of fire was not limited to warmth. It was essential for cooking, making meat easier to digest and less prone to disease. It also allowed for storing surplus for longer periods, which was vital in a time of scarce resources. Fire enabled humans to process animal hides to become more flexible and suitable for making clothing and coverings, providing additional protection against the cold. Additionally, fire was an effective deterrent for predators. At night, the fire's light scared away wolves, bears, and saber-toothed tigers, keeping them away from the shelter and ensuring a degree of safety during sleep. It also brought people together, strengthening social bonds and organization within the group. Mastering the use of fire is one of the most important human achievements that allowed Ice Age humans to survive. Fire was the beat of every, illuminating their, warming their bodies, and protecting their souls in the face of a world of snow and silence. The mere presence of shelter and fire was not enough to guarantee human survival in the Ice Age. The ability to make tools is what distinguished them from other creatures and gave them the upper hand in their struggle against a merciless environment. These tools, crafted with skill and silence, were the key to obtaining food, a means of protection, and a testament to the evolution of human thought. Initially, stone tools were the foundation. Our ancestors used complex techniques to knap flint and other stones to create sharp spearheads, knives, and scrapers. These were not just randomly chipped stones. They were thoughtful designs reflecting a deep understanding of material properties and how to exploit them. These sharp edges were necessary for cutting the meat of massive animals, processing their hides, and even shaping bone and wood. As skills evolved, humans began using other materials available in their frozen environment. Bones and ivory, leftovers from hunting giant animals, were transformed into versatile tools. Delicate sewing needles, essential for stitching hides and making warm, airtight clothing against the cold, were made from them. Spearheads, superior to stone ones, and fishhooks for fishing in rivers or lakes that weren't completely frozen, were also crafted from bone and ivory. Wood, though scarce in some icy regions, was also used to make tool handles or shelter frames. The techniques for processing these materials were simple but effective, showing humanity's capacity for innovation under pressure. These tools did not just meet basic needs, they enable humans to expand their hunting capabilities. The invention of spears with stone or bone tips allowed them to target larger and more dangerous prey from a safe distance. The use of hooks and primitive nets allowed them to diversify their food sources to include fish, which was vital during certain seasons. In the harshness of the Ice Age, hunting animals was not just a means of securing food. It was an existential struggle requiring collective intelligence, precise organization, and unwavering courage. The woolly mammoth and giant bison were not just prey, they were massive, powerful creatures whose hunt posed a deadly challenge to humans. Humans did not rely on individual strength for hunting, but on collective cooperation. Human groups worked as a single unit, planning and executing complex hunting operations. They studied animal behavior, migration patterns, and weaknesses, demonstrating a deep understanding of their environment. One common strategy was to pursue and exhaust the prey. In the open, snow-covered plains, hunters would chase massive animals over long distances, exploiting their own endurance and superior organization. This exhaustion would slow the animal, making it an easier target for sharp spears or natural traps. Humans also used the natural terrain to their advantage, driving herds of animals towards rocky cliffs, frozen marshes, or natural traps that hindered their movement. The animals' fall in these places made killing it relatively safer and reduced the risk to the hunters. Spears were not humanity's only weapon. Some discoveries suggest the use of primitive traps and pits dug into the ground, covered with snow or leaves to conceal them. These traps were used to cripple the animal or weaken it before delivering the final blow. A large hunt was a process not limited to just obtaining meat. Every part of the animal was fully utilized: hides for clothing and shelter, bones for tools and structures, fat for fuel and lighting, and even sinews for binding and sewing. These practices reflect an economy based on maximum efficiency and resource use in an environment that could tolerate no waste. Humanity's ability to hunt these giant creatures shows its cognitive and social evolution. It was no longer just on gathering and scavenging. It had become a skilled hunter, capable of exerting control over its environment, which ensured its survival and resilience in the silence of the Ice Age. In an environment where temperatures constantly dropped below freezing, mere shelter and fire were not enough for protection. Effective clothing was an absolute necessity, not a luxury, for ensuring human survival in the Ice Age. Our ancestors mastered the art of transforming the hides of massive animals into silent armor against the killing frost. The clothing of Ice Age humans was not simple skins wrapped around the body. It was crafted with immense care and skill, using the delicate bone needles mentioned earlier. These needles enabled them to stitch hides together tightly and create multi-layered garments that provided excellent thermal insulation. The primary raw materials were the hides of the animals they hunted. The hides of woolly mammoths, bears, reindeer, and wolves were thick with dense fur, providing excellent natural protection against the cold. But simply skinning the hide was not enough. It had to be processed using primitive but effective methods to make it soft, water-resistant, and durable. The processing involved scraping off any remaining flesh and fat from the hide, then rubbing it with animal fats, or even sometimes chewing it to make it pliable. Materials like ether or certain plants were also used for primitive tanning. Afterwards, the hide was dried in the air or over the fire and then smoked to increase its resistance to mold. These complex processes required significant time and effort, showing how much they valued their survival tools and garments. This clothing was made to suit the harsh conditions. It was stitched to be form-fitting and airtight at the wrists, ankles, to prevent from seeping. They included hats, move frozen environment in search of food, and ensure the continuity of their lineage in the face of the deadly, silent. Securing was not easy for Ice Age humans. They had to develop advanced skills in finding and storing food to ensure survival during long periods of scarcity and bitter cold. Hunting large animals provided vast quantities of meat, but this food had to be consumed or stored quickly before it spoiled. In the absence of modern refrigeration techniques, our ancestors resorted to primitive, effective methods of food preservation. Natural freezing was one such method. Burying meat in the snow or in the frozen ground preserved it for relatively long periods. They also practiced drying and smoking meat. After slicing them into thin strips, it was dried in cold, dry air or smoked over a fire inside the shelter. These processes removed moisture from the meat, preventing bacterial growth and significantly extending its shelf life. Dried meat was lightweight and easy to carry, making it ideal for nomadic groups. Their diet was not limited to meat. Despite the scarcity of plants in the tundra environment, Ice Age humans supplemented their by searching for edible tubers and roots that grew underground, and some berries during the warmer seasons, though these sources were less abundant. They also fished in frozen rivers and lakes, using hooks or primitive nets. Every part of a hunted animal was utilized. Nothing was wasted. Bones were broken to extract the marrow, rich in fats and energy, a vital source of calories in a cold environment that required immense energy to maintain body heat. Animal fats were also used as fuel for lighting and heat, in addition to being a rich energy source when consumed. Food was stored carefully inside shelters or in natural caches in caves or under the snow. These practices reflect humanity's foresight and ability to plan for the future, not just for the day, but for the long winter to come. The art of finding and storing food was one of the most important reasons for our ancestors' survival. A silent achievement that tells the story of their ability to adapt in the face of the harshest conditions. Human survival in the Ice Age did not depend solely on individual skills, but on their exceptional capacity for social organization and working within cohesive groups. In a merciless environment, the strength of the group was the final fortress against extinction, the silent voice that roared with survival. Human groups during that period were relatively small, consisting of several related families, usually numbering between 20 to 50 people. This size was ideal for mobility, searching for resources, and ensuring security. Every individual in the group had a specific and important role, whether in hunting, gathering food, preparing clothes, or caring for children and the elderly. The division of labor was essential. Male hunters focused on tracking and hunting large animals. Women and children were often responsible for gathering edible plants, catching small fish, and processing hides, meat, and making tools and clothing. This cooperation, with each person fulfilling their role within the system, ensured the survival of all. The exchange of knowledge and experience was also vital. Techniques for making tools, hunting methods, and the locations of resources were all knowledge passed orally from generation to generation. The elderly, despite their physical weakness, represented a living repository of wisdom and experience, offering advice and guidance, ensuring the group's continuity in facing external threats, whether predators or other human groups. Unity was the guarantee. Shared protection of the shelter and collective defense of resources were fundamental strategies. There was a deep sense of belonging and solidarity, for the survival of the individual was contingent on the survival of the group as a whole. These groups did not live in complete isolation. There were networks of exchange and communication between different groups, perhaps occurring during seasonal meetings to trade goods, share knowledge, or even find partners. These silent interactions increased the resilience of these communities and their ability to adapt. The strength of social organization, cooperation, and the division of labor were decisive factors in enabling humanity to survive the Ice Age. The group was the fundamental building block of life, providing the individual with warmth, security, and support in a cold and silent world that required the utmost cohesion to survive. Amidst all the harsh challenges of survival, Ice Age humans were not merely beings seeking physical security. They possessed a creative spirit that manifested in silent art, drawn on the walls of dark caves, leaving behind a visual legacy that tells stories of their lives, beliefs, and relationship with their world. Cave paintings are the most prominent evidence of this art. In caves like Lascaux in France and Altamira in Spain, our ancestors depicted the animals that were an integral part of their lives: mammoths, bison, reindeer, and horses. These paintings were often astonishingly realistic, showing fine details and a vibrant sense of movement, indicating their powers of observation. These paintings were not just decorative. It is believed they had spiritual or magical functions. Perhaps they were used in hunting rituals to bring good luck or ensure a successful hunt. Or maybe they were a way to train new generations to recognize animals and their behaviors. These silent paintings served as visual libraries and history books for those communities. The tools used by the ancient artists were simple but effective. They used colors extracted from minerals like red and yellow ochre, iron oxides, and charcoal. These materials were mixed with animal fats, water, or plant sap to form pigments. They were applied to the walls using fingers, feathers, or even by chewing the colors and spitting them onto the surface. In addition to animal drawings, Sar caves also show images of human hands, often printed or drawn with inks. These silent imprints point to human presence and may have had personal or spiritual significance. Art was not limited to walls. Humans also created small masterpieces from bone, ivory, and soft stone. These small sculptures depicted animals or human forms, like the famous Venus figurines, believed to be symbols of fertility. These portable artworks were part of their daily lives and show their aesthetic sense. Art in the Ice Age was more than just a hobby. It was an integral part of human survival and a means to express their fears and hopes in a harsh world. These silent whispers on cave walls tell us the story of a human spirit that created even darkest of circumstances, leaving a cultural legacy that stretches back tens of thousands of years. Despite the lack of direct evidence for spoken language in that distant era, the complex behavior of our ancestors strongly suggest the existence of a sophisticated form of communication, The collective hunting of a mammoth required high coordination, advanced planning, and quick commands and directions during the chase. These actions could not be carried out effectively without a language that allowed for the transmission of complex ideas. Language was also essential for passing knowledge and experience across generations. How did young people learn the complex art of making stone tools? How did they acquire detailed knowledge of animal behaviors and migration routes? How did they learn to identify edible and poisonous plants? All of this required oral instruction, where stories and guidance were passed down from parents and grandparents. Language was likely not just words. Ancient humans also used nonverbal communication effectively. Gestures, body language, and even complex sounds that mimicked animal calls could have played a crucial role in coordination and expressing emotions. The art in the caves itself can be seen as a form of communication. These drawings were not mere decorations. They carried messages and meanings for the community, perhaps about successful hunts, spirituality, or even important events. They served as a silent, visual language, recording a part of their history. Furthermore, language played a role in social telling stories around the fire at night, exchanging jokes, and just daily conversation strengthened the bonds between group members and gave them a sense of belonging and security in a world trying to isolate. The development of language in its spoken and unspoken forms was one of the greatest evolutionary leaps that enabled human survival. It was the invisible that bound the group members together, allowing them to learn from the past, plan for the future, and face the challenges of the Ice Age with a collective, silent voice. The dynamic nature of the Ice Age forced them to travel and migrate vast distances in search of resources and survival. These journeys, undertaken in the silence of the frozen landscape, were an integral part of the human survival strategy. The great migrations of animals were the main driver of these human movements. Herds of mammoths or reindeer, representing a vital source of food and raw materials, moved in search of seasonal pastures. The hunters, in turn, followed these herds, forcing them to traverse icy plains, cross frozen rivers, and climb snow-covered hills. These journeys were not random. Ancient humans possessed a deep knowledge of the terrain, the locations of water sources, and natural shelters. This knowledge, passed down through generations, served as silent maps, guiding them on their long travels. They knew when and where to find, and when they had to move, or resources dwindled or the cold intensified. These migrations were also a means of discovering new lands and expanding the range of human settlement. Through these continuous movements, humans gradually spread across continents, even reaching areas no human foot had touched before. This slow, silent dispersal is what allowed humanity to survive and diversify even when their numbers were small. These journeys required high physical endurance as well as good group organization. Tools, hides, stored food, and the protection of children and the elderly had to be managed under harsh conditions. It is a testament to human resilience and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances. Many archaeological discoveries, like the distribution of stone tools or the remains of temporary shelters, point to these continuous movements. They tell the story of human groups moving slowly and cautiously, step by step, to ensure their survival in a world that forced them into a perpetual search for a safe home and a reliable resource base. The ability to migrate and adapt to new environments was the cornerstone of human survival through the Ice Age. Human survival in the Ice Age did not depend solely on intelligence and cultural skills, but also on silent biological adaptations that occur in their bodies over thousands of years. These slow, gradual transformations enabled them to endure the harsh conditions of cold and hunger. One of the most prominent of these adaptations concerned human metabolism. In a very cold environment, the body needs enormous energy to maintain its internal temperature. Our ancestors may have developed a better ability to store fat and use it as an energy source when needed, providing them internal insulation against the cold and a reserve of energy during times of food scarcity. Body shape may also have undergone some adaptations. People living in very cold environments often have stocky bodies and shorter limbs compared to those living in hot regions. This body shape helps reduce the surface. Human survival in the Ice Age did not depend solely on intelligence and cultural skills, but also on silent biological adaptations that occurred in their bodies over thousands of years. These slow, gradual transformations enabled them to better endure the harsh conditions of cold and hunger. One of the most prominent of these adaptations concerned human metabolism. In a very cold environment, the body needs enormous energy to maintain its internal temperature. Our ancestors have developed better ability to store fat and use it as an energy source when needed, providing them with internal insulation against the cold and a reserve of energy during times of food scarcity. Body shape may also have even undergone some adaptations. People living in very cold environments often have stockier bodies and shorter limbs compared to those living in hot regions. This body shape helps reduce the surface area exposed to the cold relative to body volume, minimizing heat loss and keeping vital organs warm. These adaptations were not limited to external form. The body's ability to regulate its internal temperature may have also improved. This includes mechanisms like involuntary shivering to produce heat, or redirecting blood flow away from the extremities to keep the torso and vital organs warm. These processes happened involuntarily and contributed to survival. There may also have been changes in skin and hair color, as constant exposure to cold can affect pigmentation. However, evidence for these biological adaptations in that distant era is often indirect, relying on the study of skeletal remains and the analysis of genes from modern populations descended from those cold regions. These biological adaptations are not as quick or obvious as making a tool or building a shelter. They are silent, profound transformations that occur over many generations. They show how the human body itself was part of the survival strategy, slowly evolving and adapting to become more resilient in the face of extreme environmental conditions, ensuring the continuation of our species through the frozen ice ages. The ice ages did not last forever. After thousands of years of bitter, constant struggle, the global climate began to change. Slowly and imperceptibly to the humans of that time, the massive ice sheets gradually began to recede and global temperatures rose in a silent, profound shift, paving the way for a new epoch on the planet. This climatic change, which took thousands of years, had enormous effects on the environment and life. The icy plains began to melt, leading to rising sea levels and the formation of new rivers and lakes. The vegetation changed once again, with forests and shrubs that were unable to grow at the height of the Ice Age beginning to spray. As the environment changed, so did the types of animals. The massive creatures that dominated the Ice Age, like the woolly mammoth and woolly rhinoceros, saw their numbers gradually decline, and some species disappear entirely. This was likely to changes in their food sources or increased pressure from human hunting. This transition was not easy for humans. Adapting to a new environment and the disappearance of the large prey they depended on presented new challenges. Humans were forced to develop new hunting strategies focused on smaller, more agile animals, or to search for new plant-based food sources. Human groups began to settle more permanently, with lifestyles emerging that relied on hunting and gathering in specific areas rather than constant migration. This relative stability way for the emergence of the first agricultural societies, which would forever change the face of human civilization. The Ice Ages left our planet in silence, leaving behind a great legacy of human resilience. It is a testament to humanity's ability to adapt and innovate in the face of the most extreme conditions. The story of our ancestors' survival through the Ice Age is not just a chapter in history books. It is a permanent reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and its ability to survive and thrive even in the darkest of circumstances.